I am delighted to introduce in a second this amazing gentleman. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tom. Tom Sermanni is a football manager, former professional player, highly regarded for his success in developing women's football. He's previously managed the Australian women's national team across 3 stints and was reappointed in late 2024 as interim manager. Which Tom says was an incredibly proud moment to end his career, having coached them for almost 10 months. His final game in charge was Newcastle, and the national team was victorious over Argentina. They won 6 games on the bounce at home during his tenure. Outside of football, Tom loves crossword puzzles and playing Sudoku. So please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Sermanni.
I think you failed to acknowledge my most important status.
Go on.
Unemployed pensioner.
Unemployed pensioner. Mate, thank you very much for being here with us. That you've just got a taste of recruitment there, and I was trying to give you a 101 recently when we kind of caught up, and you probably think, what the bloody hell I got myself into. But can you share a little bit about your early influences and the journey into professional football and coaching?
As you can tell, it's a long time ago. Brought up by the accent on the streets of Glasgow, so things were very different back when I grew up, where you hear old people talking about these things about we went out in the street, played in the street, played between the lamppost and the lamppost. Had to be careful what neighbour's garden the ball went into because you didn't get it back sometimes. And then you just kind of progress through playing for your school team back in those days. And then club teams were actually just beginning to start. So you went into club football and you played, and what used to happen is around the grounds, there'd be these old guys in overcoats, which would be a bit dodgy today, but that's how it used to be back then. And they were scouts looking for players. And essentially, as you chipped along, you get offers to go to different clubs, etc. And there was essentially 2 pathways to becoming a professional soccer player, football player. One was to be an apprentice at 16, like an apprentice you'd be as a joiner or a plumber, where you went in there and you looked after the professionals, polished the boots, did some training, etc. And then at 18, you were deemed either good or not good enough to be a professional player, and you moved on or you moved up. Or the second way was to go through a semi-professional route, where you continued your study and then went into leagues that were semi-professional teams in the hope that one of the bigger full-time teams would buy you. And that's the route that I went. So I finished my studies, went to college, became a teacher, played semi-professional, and then at probably 23, got bought by a team, a bigger team, and then became a professional player for about 7 years in the UK. And then got an offer to come out to Australia, and I came out in the mid-80s for a year, and I'm still here.
Fair enough, fair enough. And how much would you say sheer grit, determination, work ethic have played in getting you to where you've been in your career and where you are today?
I think it's about, what I was thinking, I was actually thinking it slightly different terms. I think the things I would say is that resilience is important, but when you're an athlete, it's just natural. You kind of don't think it is any different. It's just how your life is. Risk and opportunity. Those would be the 3 things for my particular career that I would highlight. In a sense, is resilience is when you're a player. There's injuries, you get left out of teams, coaches don't want you. You have to deal with that and move on. When you become a coach, you can get a tap on the shoulder at any time and you can lose your job very quickly. But also, the way I've had a fairly diverse career path. And I think it's because I'm not a particularly risk taker kind of guy, but I've sort of taken opportunities and the risk related to that opportunity, including coming out to Australia at the time that I did. So that would probably categorize my career. I think if I look back and what's sort of determined where I've been and where I've ended up.
Okay, thank you. So the recruitment market you've just heard about, the economy, pretty tough at the moment. Building and motivating teams through challenges is paramount. So how did you approach this in football?
I think the thing, you learn as you go. It's interesting, when you start as a coach, you've got absolutely no idea what the job's about, because you just think as a player, and then you suddenly go in this job and you just don't know what you don't know. Then you get to my age and you kind of know what you don't know, and that list gets bigger and bigger every year. I think you find your way as you go, and you know, I think when you go in at the start, you've got this perceived view that this is what I've got to be as a coach. And then as you go over time, you start to look at other coaches, you start to learn your trade, learn your business, and you start to learn what actually works for you. And I think that's the most important thing. So, you know, there's a very famous Scottish manager called Sir Alex Ferguson, who coached Manchester United for many years. And he's known for being a very fierce, they call it the hairdryer, when he gets close into a player's face and basically shouts at him and the hair goes back. And a lot of coaches go in and think, well, I'll be like Alex Ferguson. For myself, I'm the total opposite of that. I don't have the voice. I don't have the physique. I'm not particularly aggressive. So you have to then find your own way of managing and your own way of motivating. And I think that the key thing is consistency is very important, particularly dealing with female players. If you become a Jekyll and Hyde character and you're coaching female players, you're going to lose them very quickly. And then it's just being authentic to actually who you are. And I think the third thing is that your athletes are important to you. So it's about how you care for your athletes. And different coaches do it in different ways. And I think those are the key things.
Thank you. So when you came back for your third stint with the Matildas in 24, you know, confidence, we talked, you said confidence was low after the Olympics, the exit. How did you tackle this, you know, I guess without making things worse?
I'm good at making things worse. It was interesting. So I came back into the Matildas just at this time last year. And the team was at a real low ebb because they'd gone into the 24 Olympics with high expectations, both internally and externally. So, and obviously the tournament and the whole campaign didn't go to plan. And sometimes, particularly in a national team, when you go into tournaments, there's not a lot of time to turn things around if they don't go right. So when I came back into the team, there's a few things that I noticed. The silence in the team was deafening. And normally in a team that's upbeat and alive and alert and confident, and I'll say particularly in a female team, there's a lot of noise. Females do talk a little bit more than males, okay? My wife proves that, trust me. Anyway, it was just deadly silent. And I remember going in for my first meeting, and we played in Switzerland. So I don't know how, but the sound of music suddenly came into the meeting, as it does. And I was trying to kind of G them up and trying a few one-liners. And I know what a comedian must feel like when they just die in front of an audience. So there was a real silence in the group. The other thing I noticed in the group was there's a lot of very well-known players now in the Matildas who in football terms are actually quite big stars. And it was kind of, not deliberately, there was like the big players' tables, and then there was the others. And there was that sense of disconnect. So I did two things at first. One, I had an individual meeting with all the players that I didn't know. I knew quite a lot of the players from previous involvement with them, but a lot of the younger players I didn't know. So I had individual meetings with them, again, just to get to know them, where they're at, how they feel, etc. And then I had a meeting with the main group of senior players. And the first one didn't go that well, because I sort of pointed out that, when we were in the dining room, there was this group there, and there was your group there. And they were totally oblivious to this, because this group of players have been in the national team for somewhere between 12 and 15, 17 years. So it's just like they've spent more of their life with each other than they have with their families or anyone else. So when they get together, they automatically just go to each other and hang about. So the first thing I said is that, that needs to change. I said, when you come in, you need to go and you need to start mixing with the other players. And they said, well, we just want them to be, they wanted the younger players just to be like they were when they were younger. And I said, but you're actually big stars now. And so for the younger players, it's much more intimidating coming into a Matilda squad. So they took that on board. I got them actually having meetings with the team just as a whole, because they never had a team meeting. So just actually having meetings on whatever. It could be lots of things. And then also had a less regimented structure where it wasn't like staff have to sit at these tables, players at these tables. So it was just trying to bring everybody together, because that's probably the most important thing. It's strange, but just people sitting down and talking to each other becomes really, really critical. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, from a playing perspective, was to get back to what culturally the Australian team is good at. And we'd kind of gone away from that a little bit. And basically the two things we said, we wanted to be what we called forward first and on the front foot. So we wanted to be like Australian teams, aggressive, attacking, having a goal, and getting back in the mix with teams again. So we focused on that kind of thing from a tactical and training and structural perspective. And then we worked on people just mingling and mixing with people and staff from an off-field perspective.
You make it sound really simple. Like, how good is that? Like, seriously, mate. Yeah, that's amazing. Coaching and leadership is more than tactics. You know, it's about culture, confidence, and performance. What are some of the lessons you've learned about motivating people, especially when the team isn't winning? Yeah,
look, it's an easy job. When the team's winning, everything's going well, everybody's healthy. It's a doddle. The job's easy. Things just work. When it's the opposite, it's the hardest job in the world, because you're constantly trying to know how to fix things. And it's trying to get the balance. Again, I'll go back. I think consistency is important. There are times when you need to have really straightforward, direct conversations with players and with a team and be very, very blunt, particularly when performance isn't up to the standard that you expect. But at the same time, from a managerial hat, you've got to make sure that you don't lose the plot. You've still got to stay calm and measured when the storm's happening all around you, and try to make logical decisions. And it becomes really difficult to make logical decisions at times when the team's not doing well, when particular players are out of form, and things just aren't running smoothly. So again, I think for a manager or a coach, just as say, keeping consistent, making critical decisions that you might have to make, and that might mean we keep the status quo, or it might mean that we need to make some really critical changes, and then going from there.
Thank you. Can you share?
Oh, sorry, last thing.
Yeah.
Never lose faith in your players. That's the real key thing.
I'm going to go off. That's a great point. I'm going to go off script. So someone's not performing. Giving feedback in sport is very different from the corporate sense.
Yeah, it is. And this is where you get to know players, and you know how you can talk to certain players some ways and how you can't talk to certain players in some ways. So you have to judge how you do it. But what I'll say to players is that you can't have it both ways, because players will say to you, we want feedback, we want communication. So what you have to say is, well, if you want that, you've got to be prepared for that hard talk, to be prepared to listen to, I don't like the way you're doing this, and this, or you need to improve here, and here. But I also say to players that whenever you come in to speak to me, Rick, you can come in and speak to me with whatever you want, and we might end up not agreeing or not coming to a satisfactory solution. But once we part, then that bit is gone and it's finished, and you move on. So you want to have honest, straightforward communication, but you don't want to have any lingering feelings of discontent on both sides. And that's probably one of the hardest bit of the job, when you have to sort of sit down, and particularly if you have to give bad, information to players, it's actually not very positive.
Okay, thank you. Can you share your best example of a team of lifting a team from a losing position?
Yeah, it was actually in the men's team. I coached.
Typical, bloody would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It was a few. I've gone into a few teams that have been losing, but most of them have just kept losing. So I got a job back before there's a competition called the A-League now in the men's football. It used to be called the National Soccer League, and it used to contain mainly ethnic teams. And there's a Sydney team called Sydney Olympic, Greek team, very Greek. a dynamic team, an amazing team, crisis every day, just like a bit like probably Greece, crisis every day. So halfway during the season, I was coaching at the AIS in Canberra in the men's youth program, and they sacked their coach halfway during the season, as they do after a couple of bad results, and asked me to come in for the rest of the season. So I've come in, and in typical, the club was in a wee bit of chaos. So we lose the first game against the team at the top of the league. We come into the second game, and I think we were 9th in the competition. The team we were playing against, Brisbane, was 6th. And it was still tight. It's a top 6 finals. And we played them at home, and we were terrible. I mean, like, you know, you hear people talking about as if coaches are magicians and fix all this. We were absolutely woeful. You know, we were lucky to have 0 on the score sheet. And we just, the game was going on, but it was still 0-0. We're still in the game. I got the subs warmed up, but I honestly did not have a clue what subs to make because we were just bad all over the field. Out of the blue, we score a goal. We just score a goal out of nothing. And we hang on to the end of the game and win the game 1-0. Okay? Now, if we had lost that game, I don't know if we'd have won another game between there and the end of the season. So basically, a couple of things that I did is that the previous coach had a training regime that was very low-key, very highly structured. And Sydney Olympic were an energy-type team. So we changed the training programs, the training regimes, become more competitive, more dynamic, etc. And that lifted the players a bit because players like to be challenged. They like to work hard. So that bit we did. And then I had a meeting with the players and I went through because we actually had a good team. We had a team where there was probably 12 or 13 players that had represented Australia at various ages. It's just that the confidence was low because we'd been losing games. So I pointed out to the players, like, here's the level that you guys have played at. So it's not like I'm inheriting a bad team. I'm actually inheriting a very good team that's just gone through a bad spell. So I think a combination of trying to boost the confidence, a little bit of training, changing the training routine and the dynamic that way, and a bit of luck. Those 3 factors together helped us kick on, and we never lost another game till the end of the season when we went into the finals. So there's, as I say, a combination, definitely luck involved, and then a little bit of changing things and good players.
Thank you. And how do you see sport and principles applied to kind of everyday business leadership?
I think it's the same. I think, you know, you put down that, you know, about businesses having a vision. And I think that's the same when you go in as a coach and you go into a club. You have a vision of how you want to play, how you want to run the club, what your expectations are on the field and off the field. And it's your job to sell that to the players as a coach. Coaches hate using the word sell, but use that because you have to convince them this is what we need to do to be successful. Same in business. If you take over a business, you probably need to convince your people this is the direction that we're going in, this is what we want to do. If it's too extreme, you probably lose them. If it's not enough, you might lose them at the other end. So it's getting that right. Then it's getting the strategy to go with that. How are we going to, the vision that we've got, how we play, how are we going to put that in place? And I'm assuming it's the same with a business. You know, if we decide that we are a local supermarket and we want to be the best in the local area, what do we do to do that? And then the third thing is a performance, and that is the outcome of your vision and your strategy and what your end result is. And if your end result's good, you've got your vision and your strategy, right? If it's not, you need to adjust it to make yourself successful.
Thank you. And continuing about vision, I guess kind of key takeaways. So you can set up, we're gonna win the league, we're gonna win the kind of competition, you have all the planning, but what if it doesn't kind of go to plan? Well,
you've got to have realism about it as well. You know, one of the things that I caution young coaches is keep expectations low, particularly if you're talking to the media. Is that you've got to be realistic of where you're at. It's kind of harder in sport because the people that generally own clubs or run clubs, who are very usually wise businessmen, lose their mind when it comes to the sporting arena. So trying to be logical, selling it upwards is probably harder than it is selling it down to your players and the people you're working with. So you've got to try and aim high, because you've got to push your athletes. You're talking about elite athletes and high performance, but at the same time you've got to be within your head realistic of where you can go. If you're a corner supermarket, you don't want to be coming out and say we're going to compete with Coles. So it's the same where you are. You've got to be realistic of what your expectations are.
So I want to bring it back to the Matildas. We had a great conversation when you talked about the stages, and they've grown from humble beginnings. You kicked off in the 90s, playing in fields, friends and family, etc., to selling out stadiums. 80,000 out at ANZ or whatever the bloody hell it's called now. Accor, is it? Changes the name every 5 minutes. Was this long-term growth? Was it planned, or did it kind of evolve along the way? Because it is a phenomenon. It
just evolved very suddenly. No, if somebody said to me 3 years ago the Matildas were going to be like they are now, I'd probably put them in a straitjacket. I think that nobody could have seen it. Nobody could have picked where they've been and where they've gone. As I say, in the 90s, they had to use their wages to pay for the boots. Now they don't even carry the boots. So it's just been a phenomenon. I've never seen anything like it in sport. And when I had the job recently, one of the best bits was just standing in the technical area before a game started, looking at the crowd. I've never witnessed in football a crowd that's like the Matildas crowd. It's a very different crowd to what normally comes to a sporting match, in the sense that they just come to see the team and the players. So obviously they want to win, but even if they don't win, they don't get unhappy, which is a good thing from a coaching perspective, is that they just love to come and enjoy the event, and the players have got such an amazing relationship with the fans. It's just amazing. I'll be interested. I just don't know how, nothing is forever in sport, but it'll be interesting to see how long they can ride this wave.
Is that the secret sauce, in terms of what you've just mentioned, right? The connection between the players and the fans.
I think that's a huge part of it. I think the fans just have such a connection with the players, and just feel that they know them. And credit to the players. It's interesting. I don't read much social media, but sometimes it's in your face. And the players get some stick, mainly from men, I must add. They get some stick about being entitled and being all this sort of stuff. But the stuff they do with the fans is just amazing. They'll spend an hour after a game signing autographs, photos, and doing all this. So they make the connection. And the fan base is very, very important to them. So the players themselves deserve a huge amount of credit to the way that they've managed this success that they've had.
One more question, then we'll go to the audience. But you mentioned it yourself. You're famously calm under pressure, clearly leading with a vision. Has this always come naturally, or did it take time and a bit of development along the way? It took
a bit of time. There's a couple of things. I think this is why I had to leave Glasgow. I wasn't aggressive enough. I'm by nature, I'm not necessarily an aggressive person. I don't have one of those. I always envied coaches that had a voice that took the wallpaper off the dressing rooms, and I just don't have one of those booming voices. I had, you do have your moments in the game when you look and you go, what did she do that for? You have those moments, but sort of generally, my personality, it takes me a while to get angry. I do, but it takes me a wee while. And the other thing is that during the game, I find it more and more now, it's really important to actually just focus on the game. And once you start sort of losing the plot with the fourth official or the referee or your own players or the other coach, you start to lose the focus on the game, and that's the most important part. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Still awake?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think of recruitment much like sport. You mentioned having some superstars in the team, and in recruitment you have some superstars, the top billers. How do you get them to play as part of a team when they see themselves as exceptional?
That's a good question. Well, you know, the interesting thing about players is that some of the players that give the impression and look the persona of being the most confident, deep down inside of the biggest anxieties, strangely enough. I think it's a mix. And sometimes you don't. Probably more so in men's football. More so in men's football, the star, because men are a bit more individually egotistical, shall we say. So they're probably a bit more sort of standoffish. But the other guys don't really care because they win the games for them. So they've got a different outlook. In a women's team, being part of the team is actually very important. And I think by nature, women are much more collaborative and much more team-oriented generally than male players. So by nature, those players, the ones that I've had, have always been sort of part of the team and not sort of aloof in big time. It doesn't happen so much in the women's game.
Thank you.
But again, as long as you win your games, they tolerate them.
Any more?
So you talked about that you're kind of like a risk opportunities type person. So what would you say was one of, I guess, a risk that you took that gave the biggest reward?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I was coaching in the men's national league here in early 2000, a team called Canberra Cosmos, and a new women's professional league started up in America, and I got approached by a club to go there, and it fell through. And then just before the league started, a friend of mine got a job at one of the teams, and they asked me to go over there as an assistant coach. So I kind of went from being a reasonably high-profile coach here in men's football to actually going to be an assistant coach in a new league in women's football in a different country, which was a pretty significant, career-wise, was seen as a significant step backwards. But looking overall, particularly women's football in America was where football was at that time, and it opened up a whole lot of other opportunities for me. And if I look back, that opportunity led me to coaching in that league, eventually led me to getting the US women's national team job, and then coaching in a further professional league there. So taking that step backward opened up other opportunities for me, which fortunately enough were positive. So that's probably a sense of risk that I took at the time that worked out really well.
Thank you. Any more? Simon?
I may add that my wife is glad to get me out of the house. So when I go overseas, it's even better.
There's not many, if any, female managers managing the top national teams or elite men's teams that I can see and I'm aware of. But there's a number of people like yourself managing national teams and elite female teams. What are the differences that, from the player's perspective, if there are any differences in the management styles, what male and female managers bring to the team? And do you think there's a point in time where some of the top female managers will actually manage like a premiership team or a national team? Is that going to happen?
I think it will happen. It happens in bits and pieces. But I think what you've got to look at is that professionally, the women's game is still very young. Extraordinarily young, and it's only the current generation of players, older players, that have sort of been professional players. So if you look back in women's football, what tended to be happening is that females were either semi-professionals or even amateur players. They played their time and then they had to go and get a real job and off to work. So it's only now that the game is evolving that there's now talk of some female managers going into the male game. And it's only now in the last few years that males have started, well, not last few years, probably the last 8-10 years, that males have actually seen a career path in the women's game. So I think it's a question of time and evolution, and I think it will happen at some stage.
One more? Anyone?
My question is about agents. If you have a soccer player, and my nephew's just made Joey's team, we're just wondering, is it a good thing or a bad thing to have a soccer agent, and does it have any influence in your decision when selecting for the top team?
No, I think generally it's not a good thing for coaches, because it used to be easier when we just dealt with players. But I think it's a good thing for a player now to have an agent, because it gives them a barrier between the coach and the team. So, and also now it's just part of the business now. In fact, I do some stuff at West Sydney Wanderers in the women's space, and most of the female players who are 16 and 17 now have agents. So it just provides a buffer, firstly, but it also gets someone who is out there looking for other opportunities for the player. It doesn't tend to impact whether a team sign you or whether they don't, unless the agent becomes, irrational and asks, for ridiculous terms. That's the only way. But outside of that, I think from a player's perspective, it's a wise thing to get an agent.
Thank you. Last thing, one piece of advice: leadership. You're managing a team. It's not going your way. Okay. What would you do?
Well, firstly, don't become a soccer coach. That's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is that, can I give a quick 2 or 3? Is again, and it's the way that I've lived my career. So, if I not, and I say this to young coaches who, go back and forth, will I take a job? I keep saying, take a job, get in a job, take an opportunity, then see what happens from there. The final thing I would say is, don't work with miserable, negative people if you can help it. They can't do us.
Tom,
please
we work in recruitment, mate.
Oh yeah, you're probably meeting them every day of the week. But it's it's different. I'm a kind of collaborative sort of coach, so I cannot handle working with people where you feel it's an imposition of you're asking them to do stuff. I need people to get on with it, take initiative, but also you don't want yes people. You want people that you can discuss, who can give you an opinion, give you a view. But the negative, oh no, not for me. Sorry.
So no negative people. 20 hours on the weekend reading the copywriting book, and apart from that, we're all sweet. I think we've just killed. And no automation. I think we just killed the recruitment industry.
Well, the negative people, send them to companies you don't like.
We do that, and no one will do that. Give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much.